Somewhere in the mountains between France and Spain, a people live who don't quite fit, not by language, not by their genes, and not by history. Their language has no known relatives anywhere on Earth. Their blood tells a story no other European population tells. Every language in Europe today, French, German, Russian, Greek, Hindi, traces back to one ancestral tongue, Proto-Indo-European, every language except one. Euskara, the Basque language, does not belong to that family. It doesn't belong to any family. It stands completely alone. No known relatives, living or dead. No ancestor language linguists can find. No connection to anything ever spoken on this planet. That's not a small anomaly. That is a linguistic impossibility that somehow kept happening anyway. Euskara has almost no Latin borrowings. This is true even though the Romans occupied the region for centuries, absorbing nearly every other culture they touched. The Basque counting system runs in base 20, not base 10. This suggests a mathematical framework that developed in complete isolation. It avoided the numerical thinking that organized the rest of the ancient world. Certain Basque words are structurally primitive, hates for rock, ur for water, su for fire. Linguists believe these words may represent some of the oldest surviving vocabulary in any living human language. I once spent an afternoon trying to learn basic Basque phrases. I was planning a trip through the Pyrenees. 10 minutes in, I genuinely wondered if I was reading the page correctly. It does not yield. It does not offer handholds. Nothing about it reminds you of anything you already know. This language resists. It hints at a deeper reason for their difference, beyond just words. The linguistic puzzle was deep. Then scientists looked at the blood, and the story got much more complex. In the 1940s, medical researchers studying Basque groups made a discovery. Nobody had a good explanation for it. The Basques carried the highest concentration of Rh-negative blood of any population on Earth. In some communities, the number was as high as 47%. The European average is about 15%. They also had unusually high rates of type O blood. This created a genetic profile found nowhere else in Europe. This mattered beyond just medicine. H-negative blood frequency is not stable when populations mix. When different groups marry and blend over generations, H-negative rates usually drop towards the regional average. The Basques held these concentrations far above everything around them. This pointed to one conclusion. They had not been mixing. Not recently, and possibly not for a very long time. The blood studies could not say why. Two theories came up quickly. Both immediately stalled. Either the Basques were the last descendants of Europe's first hunter-gatherers. These were people who lived on the continent before farming arrived. They simply never absorbed the waves of newcomers that followed. Or they were migrants from somewhere unknown. They arrived in the Pyrenees from a place that left no clear trace. They became isolated after they got there, not before. Both ideas had some points in their favor, but neither had enough proof to end the debate. The tools needed to settle it did not exist yet. For decades, the Basques stayed what they had always been, a question that kept returning, an answer that kept retreating. The age of ancient DNA changed everything. In 2021, a team led by Dr. David Comas at the University of Barcelona published a full genetic study of Basque groups. They looked at 600,000 genetic markers from 200 Basque individuals. Each person had all 4 grandparents from the same small area. They compared these to almost 2,000 people from across Europe and the Mediterranean. The method was designed to give a clear answer, and it did. What they found surprised everyone. The exotic migration theory had been wrong. There was no mysterious ancestry from some unknown place. No ghost population or vanished civilization left its genetics in the Pyrenees and then disappeared. Instead, the data showed something even more remarkable. It showed continuity. This was extraordinary. It was almost unbroken genetic continuity, stretching over 2,500 years to the Iron Age. Iron Age Basque genetic profiles are virtually indistinguishable from modern Basque populations. This stopped me when I first read it. Most European populations show huge genetic changes in just a few centuries. Migration and conquest always do their work. The average Spaniard today carries ancestry from at least 6 major groups: Romans, Visigoths, Moors, earlier Iberian farmers, steppe migrants, all moving through over thousands of years. The Basques absorbed almost none of it. Europe's entire genetic map was being rewritten around them. They stayed essentially the same. Dr. Comas said these findings were unlike anything documented before in Europe. That is not a casual scientific understatement. That is a researcher who has spent his career studying human genetic variation, telling you that what he found had no real precedent. The continuity finding was powerful, but then researchers looked closer at the patterns within the Basque population itself. The picture became genuinely unexpected. This genetic isolation was not passive. It was not simply the mountains and geography keeping outside groups away. The Pyrenees are real, but they are not the Himalayas. People crossed them all the time throughout history. Trade moved through them. Armies moved through them. What the data showed was that the main reason for Basque genetic distinctiveness was not geography at all. It was language. The link was precise enough to be startling. Communities where Euskara had always been spoken showed the strongest genetic isolation. Regions where the language was once present, but then slowly disappeared, showed intermediate patterns. There was a measurable blurring at the edges. Territories where Euskara had never been spoken showed much more mixing with surrounding populations. The language boundary and the genetic boundary were effectively the same boundary. The detailed findings go even further. Different Basque dialects matched distinct genetic subdivisions within the population. Researchers could actually predict which dialect a person spoke just by looking at their DNA. Communities separated by only 15 kilometers showed genetic differences. These differences would be normal between populations on opposite sides of a continent. Take the Roncal Valley in Navarre. This community of shepherds spoke their own distinct variant of Euskara. Their genetic patterns had stayed stable for over 1,000 years. Marriage records from the 16th century showed that more than 90% of Basques married within their own dialect group. Not just the same language, the same specific variant of it. Euskara was not a symptom of Basque isolation. It was the mechanism. The language was the wall, and for 2,000 years it held. If you find these deep dives into human history and unexpected scientific discoveries fascinating, subscribe. We are about to explore what this means for Europe's entire genetic story. Europe, as most people understand it genetically, is a palimpsest, layer written over layer over layer. Over thousands of years, wave after wave of migration swept across the continent. Anatolian farmers arrived, pushing out the original hunter-gatherers. Then steppe pastoralists came from the east during the Bronze Age. They completely changed the genetic makeup of almost all of Europe. Romans, Germanic tribes, Slavic expansions all added their own layers. The European gene pool we see today is the result of these repeated changes. The original genetic blueprint is almost entirely gone. Almost entirely. The Basques are different. Geneticists call them a genetic refuge. This population absorbed so little of those successive migration waves, their genes still hold the signature of Europe from before all those changes began. When scientists compare modern Basque DNA with ancient European samples from before the big Bronze Age movements, the match is remarkable. No other living group on the continent shows this kind of resemblance. When you look at a Basque person today, you are looking further back into European prehistory. It is a measurable biological fact. You cannot do that almost anywhere else. Cultural evidence supports this at every level. The Basque inheritance system, called exea, kept property within single-family lines. This naturally discouraged marriages outside the group. Basque women had property rights and social freedoms. These were practically unheard of in medieval Europe. This meant they chose to marry within their communities. They were not traded away out of necessity. Their ancient mythology features earth goddesses. These stories are older than any Indo-European religious framework. These are not just colorful local tales. They are proof from a completely different kind of evidence. All of it points to the same thing. Something here was preserved that everywhere else was lost. The Pyrenees did not save the Basques. That comfortable idea, that simple geographic answer, just does not hold up when you look at the data. Plenty of groups lived behind mountains, far more rugged than the Pyrenees. Those populations still saw their genetics completely rewritten over centuries. Mountains might slow down an army, but they do not stop ideas. They do not stop traders. They do not block the slow, steady pull of neighboring cultures that happens over generations. Something else was at work here. What the evidence really points to is a collective will, a community that, generation after generation, simply chose to remain itself. They made deliberate choices. They married within their language group. They passed property down through established family lines. They held on to traditions that created dense, self-contained social networks. Outside influence just found no easy way in. The language was the tool for this, but the language itself was a choice. It had to be renewed constantly. Children had to learn it. It had to be preserved, even during times when abandoning it would have been much easier. That has implications far beyond the Basques themselves. It suggests that cultural identity, when maintained deliberately and passed forward with genuine intention, can be more durable than any physical barrier humans have ever constructed. Now, there is a practical side to this philosophical idea. Because Basque populations represent such an unusually unmixed genetic baseline, they have become incredibly valuable to disease researchers. Scientists are trying to understand human biology before centuries of mixing complicated the picture. Their isolation, which for so long looked like just a curiosity, is now a scientific asset. And this genetic thread runs right into the present. It lives in people in Bilbao, Bayonne, and San Sebastian today. They carry something ancient and continuous in their biology, something that connects them directly to a Europe that no longer exists anywhere else. That is not a metaphor. That is a measurable biological fact. Somewhere in the mountains between France and Spain, a people live who do not fit. The DNA did not solve the Basques. It confirmed the mystery was always real. What the genetics added was not a simple answer. It gave us proof. It proved that a people can truly remain themselves. They can do it across 2,000 years of pressure. They can do it through invasions and transformations all around them. This was not by accident. It was not just geography. It was a choice made continuously across hundreds of generations. That is what makes them extraordinary. It is not that they simply survived. Plenty of cultures survived in some diluted form. The Basques survived intact. They are a living thread. It reaches back to a Europe that exists nowhere else. They still speak the impossible language. They are still themselves. If this kind of deep cultural survival fascinates you, subscribe. I look for stories like this every week. And tell me in the comments, what other ancient cultures do you think have maintained their identity against overwhelming odds?